to Off the Shelf, the podcast where we take books off of our shelves and into our hearts. My name is Julia, and today I'm here to sign off the month with my final review and talks on our October reads, Pumpkinheads by Rainbow Rowell and Faith Erin Hicks, and Garlic and the Vampire by Bree Paulson. I also want us to do a bit of thinking on the limitations of the graphic format in general, and draw comparisons between the two books which illustrate the way that they interact with and maybe even begin to overcome those challenges and limits. If you went freestyle this month and picked up something different, then I'd be interested to know if and how your pick or picks face these challenges as well. First, though, we'll start off as usual with quick overviews on plot and characters, as well as standout themes and key moments in the stories. To review, Pumpkinheads is about two best friends, Deja and Josiah, who decide with varying levels of dedication that their last ever night at their seasonal job at a popular pumpkin patch needs to go out with a bang, without holding back anything. Deja is the more determined and willing party, and very much a person who believes that if you want something, you can't wait around for it to fall into your lap. Josiah tends more toward erring on the side of caution and believing in fate. As he sees it, if it's meant to be, it will be. The two of them go through trial and error to track down this girl who Josiah's been into for years at the patch, and it proves to be more of a roundabout wild goose chase than anything else. But all the while, they also get to see a lot of the patch and do a lot of the things they've never had the chance to do, usually being stuck in the same zone of the patch every year to work. Over the course of the evening, as their time together and at the patch begins to run out, they realize a lot of things. Most importantly, though, they realize what the job has done for each of them over the years, and what they've become to each other through it. That is, inseparable and lifelong friends. I thought the pace of this book was really engaging, and I loved the way that the two best friends interacted with that pace. The way that each of them grew through the knowledge that their time was slowly running down. I loved the relationship that the two of them share, even though they're quite different people at heart and have different ways of thinking and going about doing things. They push each other to become the best versions of themselves without ever actually trying to force a change in the other that isn't meant to be. They never try to force something that would make the other uncomfortable or unhappy or not themselves. They balance each other out. They understand each other even when they don't fully agree with how they should go about accomplishing their common goal. Even when the ulterior motives that drive each of them are distinct from each other, they never let their own wants put in danger the better good of the other. In general, this book is really about going for it. Going for something you've always wanted without giving in to the fear that it won't work out. That isn't to say that we'll never meet disappointment if we do just go for it, because that isn't the truth, and the book doesn't give any romantic illusions of that. As we follow Deja and Josiah through their convoluted trek through the park to meet Josie's dream girl, I think what we start to realize is that sometimes what we think is the end goal doesn't actually turn out to be. And that sometimes the only way to continue on is to realize that instead of holding on to something that wasn't meant to be. If we do hold on to it for too long, as we go through the motions of getting there, we might miss out on a whole lot of opportunities. And those opportunities might matter a whole lot more than the dream we've been chasing. The book isn't saying that you can't hold on to things like that, because there's a huge amount of value in the things that motivate us, regardless of whether they turn out the way we want them to or not. What I think it's encouraging us to do is to recognize when those romantic ideas we have of the things we think we want stop us from enjoying the reality of the thing when we get it. What it's saying to me as well is the idea that if you aren't going to go for something and realize and accept what the reality of the dream is, and then decide if it's actually meant for you, then you're no better off than if you'd never dreamed of anything at all. We can't hang on to ideas we have of things or people and assume that's what they really are, like Josiah does with building up in his head the girl he's been crushing on. He even says at one point that he started to think that he doesn't even really need to meet the girl because he already feels like he knows her after pining after her for so long. But in the end, the truth he sees is that he doesn't actually know her at all. At the start of the book, in fact, he doesn't even know her first name. The ideas he's come to about his fudge shop girl, Marcy, are really just ideas. Hang on to those ideas really isn't fair to the thing or the person, and it isn't healthy to ourselves or our other relationships. What Deja helps Josiah to see is that necessity of finding truth before you dedicate yourself to the idea that having this one thing or person is the only way for you to be happy. as he comes to find it's not our ideas or our goals that we can't live without, but the people and places that help us to achieve our goals, those who shape us into who we need to be to achieve them. Quite simply put, I love this book. If there's anything that really makes a graphic novel readable and appealing for me, it's the art style itself and the effectiveness of the interaction between art and story. That collaboration in this book was so seamless. The two built one another up so well, and it was such a pleasure. So much fun to read. Again, I loved how engaging the pace was. I felt like I was right there with Deja and Josiah, racing against the clock and kind of hoping, like they do too, that when time did run out, it wouldn't necessarily have to mean the end. I honestly could have read another 200 pages of their last night at the patch, and I wouldn't have been sad about it. I loved how much Josiah loves his job and cares about the patch. I love how sad he clearly is to have to let it go. And I'm so glad that even though what he's thought he's won for so long doesn't work out, that doesn't sour his memory of the patch. That he finally sees what he has, what or who has been right in front of him, or maybe just behind him, sidetracked by a candy apple stand all along. I think so often we hold on to things for so long, and we forget to look out for those other opportunities for so long that we feel cheated when things don't work out. But the truth, as Deja helps him to see, is that those things and life don't owe us anything. It's on us to get out there and figure out what we really want. And from there, it's on us to do what it takes, what's in our power to actually achieve those goals. We can't wait to happen upon opportunity, because how often does that actually happen? We have to take advantage of the chances that come up that might otherwise pass us by, and we have to set our own goals in motion. The last thing I want to mention about this book by itself is just how much I loved how fully fall it feels. The setting and content, sure, but even the style of the art itself, the color palette, the backdrops and the landscapes, the characters' clothing, all lend themselves to producing this air and atmosphere of autumn, like they say in the book, like every autumn smell all at once. I've talked out seasonal reading moods, so I won't harp on this one, don't worry. Even though this is a book that I could probably read at any time of year and still love, there was something about reading it right now, in full fall mode, that made it hit me just that much better. Moving along for now, my second pick for the month was also an absolute delight of one. Brie Paulson really came through for me, and for all of us, in Garlic and the Vampire. And if you haven't picked it up yet, I truly do hope you do soon. Even if you're not a regular graphic novel reader, or if you're not a regular middle grade reader, it's fast and it's adorable. And it's written for kids, but I laughed out loud more than once, and I honestly couldn't get enough. I'm thrilled that there's a sequel, and I've already got it on order for myself with my work's next order from the publisher. As a quick refresher, the story follows the journey of Garlic, a bulb with enough anxiety to fill a room and leave no breathing space for any fraction of self-confidence. She lives a quiet life as a hired gardener for the witch who gave her and her fellow veggie people sentience, and she claims to like it that way, most of all because she's too scared to think of what might happen if she dares to dream of more. After a vampire returns to the far-off castle, she's sent, most unwillingly, by her veggie gardener friends to confront him. And what we get is the pleasure of reading her journey, to face the fear she carries of the unknown. What she finds, both along the way and at the end of her path, is that she, like a lot of the rest of us, I think, tends to build up things in her head unnecessarily, her fears most especially of all. The book illustrates the way that she, like we, are often our biggest obstacles in having new experiences, in meeting opportunities, and enjoying the process of working through them, whether we turn out to find success or failure in the end. We fear failure a lot of the time because we've been raised and taught and trained on the idea that failure is a shameful thing, sometimes even the end of the world, but it doesn't need to be either. When we accept the fact that the risk of failure and making mistakes are a healthy part of learning, we actually make it a lot easier on ourselves to learn more, to find out both what doesn't work and maybe eventually what does work. In the book, it isn't just that Garlic doesn't want to have new experiences, because we see on more than one occasion that the idea of a little adventure is something that hangs in the back of her mind, and something that bothers her every day and even excites her a little bit. She tries with everything she is to not let herself want it, though. She doesn't let herself entertain the idea long enough to actually consider seeking adventure out. Maybe because it's unknown, and because what's unknown undoubtedly brings danger, and danger potentially brings failure. One of the strongest aspects of this book to me in this regard was how accurate and real life its representation of anxiety is. I talked a bit about this last time, but I wanted to go into it a bit further because I think it's a topic that has many faces and sides, and Paulson does a really wonderful job of displaying that. Garlic is a nervous little bulb, and what makes her most nervous of all, it often seems like, is the fear of disappointing others, of not being whoever others expect her to be. More accurately, though, she fears not being who she thinks others expect her to be. The book's first scene shows her waking up after oversleeping and rushing to the market where she works with the rest of the witch's living vegetable gardening team, and she apologizes absolutely profusely to everyone she runs into on her way and for her lateness, and basically worries that the witch is counting down the number of days before she can cut Garlic loose, bring to life a bulb who will arrive on time and work more diligently instead. Garlic shares with Carrot, her best friend, that one of her biggest fears is being a disappointment, but the expectations that she thinks others place on her to be perfect, one way or another, aren't actually expectations from anyone other than herself. The other vegetables put it on her to face the vampire, sure, but mostly because they know the superstition that vampires are averse to garlic, not because they expect her to be fearless about it, and not because they just want to see her fail, except for maybe celery. As we see from celery too, maybe none of the other veggies are actually confident that any one of them could face the vampire without fear, and so they don't expect that from garlic, or they shouldn't. But when she stops giving in to the fear of the unknown and the risk that comes with it, and also into the fear she has of potentially failing in that unknown, she finds that she's actually capable of a lot more than she thinks. I think from garlic we can learn a lot about ourselves and our own capabilities too. Everyone is scared sometimes, and everyone faces failure sometimes. It's more about how we face challenges, and what we do with our failure, or even just the potential for failure. Do we let that potential scare us away? And if and when we do fail, do we sit in it and let it seep into us and eventually make us give up the hope that we can try again? Or do we learn from it? The answer, I think, is the same regardless of how old we are. If I've learned anything about taking chances, making mistakes, and getting messy, then what I've learned is that when we stop learning, we stop moving forward. If we assume that we've learned everything there is to learn, we stop ourselves in place. We have to keep learning. Maybe the one thing I did find a bit underwhelming in the book as I was reading was the reveal of the vampire and the built-up showdown between himself and Garlic. Even as a story for kids, it was a bit anticlimactic, but the more I think about it, the more I realize that maybe it plays into the theme of facing our fears too. Like Garlic's and her friends do, our minds play tricks on us a lot when it comes to fear. We often build up the things that scare us a lot more than they're actually worth. We dedicate a lot more time worrying about them than what attention they're actually due in reality. What Garlic finds is not a bloodthirsty, power-hungry villain sketching out his plans for world domination, but someone who actually has a lot more in common with her than she originally would have thought possible. She finds, as the back cover implies, that strangers, and more generally the unknown, aren't always as scary as we build them up to be. To that end, yes, we're a lot braver than we think we are, but further, we put a lot more expectation on ourselves to be brave than we actually need to. Nobody expects us to be brave all the time. What I think is maybe the most fulfilling and beneficial and downright precious part of Garlic's character development is that she goes from being an anxious little bulb who worries she's always doing something wrong to one who becomes not only confident and brave for herself, which honestly would be enough of a development to make a good and satisfying story, but a leader who inspires those qualities in those around her. That's so beautiful, especially to a person who has struggled with confidence and bravery all my life. To think we learned all this from a little garlic bulb. Wholesome. So, I think I've made my feelings pretty clear about this one. I loved it. I went to put it on reorder for my work, and when I saw there was a sequel coming out now, titled Garlic and the Witch, if you're interested, I got so excited. I think all of this, both books, how lovely the stories both are, how well the story is conveyed through the collaboration of both mediums, really sets in stone for me how important it is that we realize that traditional classic literature and conventional novels aren't all there is in this big, abstract, vague notion we have of what real literature is. Graphic novels and comic books have a long history of being considered sort of a step below, and that isn't fair. There is still so clearly so much value in them, and to lose out on that because we're too pretentious to think that we have anything to learn from books with pictures? Tragic, truly. I mean, sure, could each of these stories been told just through their words? Of course, but it would have changed so much about the way we receive them and take them to our hearts. Something I realized working at a kids' bookstore and looking at a whole lot of picture books is how much their artwork matters to me. The style, the detail, and the way that those pictures enhance the story being told. One of my favorite things to look out for is the way that the characters are drawn, and most of all, the expressions and the body language they're carefully drawn with, and the wordless actions they take. Graphic novels also sometimes use silence quite strategically, and that in itself is interesting because it turns the whole idea we have of what a book is and how a story is told around. There are so many visual cues in these books' images, for humor or tragedy alike, for character development, for atmosphere, that you miss in just the text, and which you can very easily miss too if you even just read too quickly, if you just focus on the words and not on the illustrations as well. As well, though, without the words, these actions might be read incorrectly or interpreted in a lot of different ways, and it can be confusing. I know I've said it 100 times over already here, but it's so important to our reading experience that we really take on everything we're given, if we want to see the whole picture and not just a piece. It's so important that we realize that every brush stroke, every word, every paragraph, every color is intentional. If there's more to tell, if there's more that the author wants to convey, even if it's through more than just the words they share with us, that we listen, and we see, and we observe what those things are. Sometimes those different levels of the story seem to agree, but I think what's more interesting, what sometimes reveals more, is when they don't seem to on the surface. It leads us to the understanding that there's always more than just what's in the words, or just in the pictures. One of my favorite examples of this interaction is from Pumpkinheads on pages 106 and 107. Josiah and Deja are deep into it, into their quest to both find Josiah's fudge girl and to taste all the snacks, and additionally maybe to make the most of their last night. The two best friends have been zigzagging across the patch all evening, both very aware of every moment that passes while they pass obstacle after obstacle at every stop they make. These 2 pages are so cute because I feel like at this point we've really gotten to know Josie and Deja both really well through their words and conversations, and through those we understand how dedicated they each are to their mission and to each other. But these panels don't give us any of that. They show each of the friends in turn get distracted and seem to kind of forget about their quest altogether. When the two sprint past an apple cider slushy stand on 106, Deja strolls back, waylaid by the promise of deliciousness, and on the next page we see the two of them sipping away as they continue on their path. Next is Josiah's turn to get thrown off, seeing a group of guests to the patch, confused over a map of the park's grounds. He rushes over to give them directions, the wholesome and sweet park worker that he is, and only once they've got their bearings, the friends continue on. What's even more lovely, maybe, about the set of images is how well the two friends seem to understand each other. Neither of them seem put out or annoyed that the other has been diverted from what they made their common goal. Josiah accepts a slushie, and Deja waits patiently for Josie to finish lending a hand. These 2 pages, to me, show so much of their character, who each of the friends is at heart, without the preoccupation of a mission they've set themselves to for the night. In the end, their last night working together really isn't about the mission at all, about Marcy the Fudge Queen, or even Deja's boredom with working the same position year after year. In the end, it's about the two of them making the most of what could be their last evening if they don't do anything else about it. And in the end, what matters too is that they're spending that time on the same page instead of finding reasons to argue over what their mission is truly all about. It takes each of them a little bit longer to figure it out, to find the words to express their feelings over it all. But the easy way that they are with each other and their patience with each other, shown more through their actions and their silence in each other's company than anything else, tells all that we really need to know. In Garlic and the Vampire, we're also given sets of silent panels that fill in gaps where the words don't quite do the characters justice. I think one of my favorite examples of this is on page 131, where Carrot is waiting for Garlic to return from the vampire's castle. Throughout the first part of the book, from Carrot's handwritten note at the beginning, warning that if she sleeps in again, it isn't their fault, to their gentle teasing at the market, to their encouragement of her to go face the vampire, it's quite clear, at least in my reading, how much Carrot cares about Garlic doing well, but in her own time. They believe so much in her, but they know her well enough to know that to push her is to break her. I can't help but think, though, that in this set of panels from 131, where we see them waiting for her, about how much they must still feel responsible. It was Carrot, in the end, who really became the final voice. Garlic needed to take that final step and to venture into the unknown. If she'd never come back, they'd feel forever at fault. The silence in these panels, the expression on their sweet little vegetable face, the way that the different companions waiting for Garlic come and go while Carrot stays, say so much more about their character than just their words do. These books were so much fun to read this month, you guys. If you didn't get the chance to pick them up yet, as always, I highly recommend doing so. The best part about them is that they're quick reads, even if taking our time with the images. They're fast and fun and engaging, and they say so much without taking up too much of our time. A precious thing, now that we're well into our semesters or our Halloween preparations, maybe even getting an early start on our Christmas and holiday seasons. I don't know. I won't harp too much on the specifics of these books, but just know that they're so lovely and so worth it. For the rest of today, I'll leave you as usual with a couple of recommendations to close us out. As I have been perfectly honest about before, I have a lot of graphic novels, and I haven't read nearly enough of them, but I'm trying to get better. One of my favorite, yet understated aspects of both of my picks for this month was the quiet representation that they both include. What I mean by quiet is that the characters' identities don't write their storyline for them. Deja is a beautifully proud young black girl who also provides positive plus-size rep, as well as bi or pansexual rep, as it's stated that she's dated both boys and girls. In spite of this multi-layered and intersectional identity that she has, her story is about so much more than those markers. It's about friendship and love and growing up, and maybe most importantly of all, excellent pumpkin patch snacks. In Garlic and the Vampire, Garlic deals with a lot of anxiety, but her storyline isn't about that anxiety in itself. It's about the way she works through it, and how she comes out better for it. A couple of other reads I've found that also handle the representation in this way, in whatever form it comes, are the Lumberjanes graphic novels by a number of various authors, the Goldie Vance graphics by Hope Larson and various artists, I'll Give You the Sun by Jendy Nelson, and More Than This by Patrick Ness. For these last two novels, it's actually been a number of years since I read them, but I remember really loving them at the time of reading. I do hope they've aged well. As for more graphic novels that deal with themes of friendship, self-esteem, and growing up, some of my recent favorites have been the Witch Boy series by Molly Knox Astertag. The books follow a boy named Aster who lives in a magical community where all of the girls are raised to be witches and all of the boys to be shapeshifters. He grows up with a keener interest in and knack for witchcraft, though, and even when he's treated harshly for it and warned about the dangers, he knows that this magic is what he's meant to do. Another really sweet graphic that I read not too long ago was The Prince and the Dressmaker by Jen Wang, which tells of a young girl seamstress whose dreams and talent outshine her modest upbringing, and of a young prince who hires her on to become their personal seamstress, to make them the most beautiful dresses anyone has ever seen, and to allow them to escape the demands of the palace and spend the nights being someone else for a change. Aside from those, I would of course recommend Rainbow Rowell's other books. They also deal with themes of deep friendship extending to love, unconditionality, and selflessness in relationships, but of personal growth and overcoming personal struggles and mental health obstacles above all else. Carry On was great, as was Eleanor and Park, but my favorite might still be Fangirl. It's also been a number of years since I last read it, but to me as a teen it spoke a lot to the way that I felt buckled down by my own social anxiety and shyness, and the personal journey that Kath goes through was one that I found really relatable at the time. So, that's it for this month. I hope you had as much fun as I do reading graphics, or at least, I hope that something I've shared of my own experience inspires you to give them a first or second chance if you're not totally sold on them yet. If they still just aren't for you, then that's okay too. Thank you so much, no matter where you're at with graphics, for joining me this month, and take good care until next time, for our November lunch. Happy reading. The Off the Shelf podcast is a proud member of the Ordinary Podcasting Network. To learn more about this podcast or the network, please visit ordinarypodcast.com. Finally, thank you for listening, and if you haven't already, please subscribe or leave us a comment. Thank you so much, and take care.